The desert wind carried more than dust that morning. It carried ghosts. Micah Holt felt them swirling around him as his horse crested the final ridge overlooking Dust Vale. The town sprawled below like a festering wound in the earth's red flesh. 10 years. 10 years since he'd last seen this place. And it looked smaller than memory painted it. Meaner, too. He dismounted near a cluster of weathered rocks, their surfaces carved smooth by decades of sandstorms. The leather of his saddle creaked as he adjusted it, a sound that reminded him of better days when that same creak meant adventure, not vengeance. His fingers found the worn photograph tucked inside his vest pocket. Samuel's face stared back at him, frozen in a moment of laughter from before everything went to hell. Should have stayed away from their tables. Sam. Micah muttered to the photograph. Should have listened when Ma said gambling was the devil's arithmetic. The cemetery lay on the eastern edge of town, a collection of crooked crosses and crumbling headstones fighting a losing battle against the encroaching sand. Micah led his horse through the rusted gate, its hinges screaming protest. The sound scattered a murder of crows that had been pecking at something near the fresher graves. He didn't look too close at what they'd found. Samuel's grave was exactly where the letter had said it would be, 3rd row back, marked by a simple wooden cross already showing signs of rot. No name, no dates, just another forgotten soul in a town full of them. Micah knelt in the dust, removed his hat, and let the silence stretch between them. "I'm here now," he said finally. "Took me longer than I promised, but I'm here." The wind picked up, sending grit into his eyes. He blinked it away and stood, replacing his hat with a deliberate care. From this vantage point, he could see Langton's Fortune, the casino that squatted in the center of town like a bloated tick, its gaudy painted facade mocking the weathered buildings around it. Even from here, he could hear the faint sounds of music and laughter drifting on the wind. The boarding house Micah chose sat on the wrong side of the tracks. If Dust Vale had been big enough to warrant tracks, misses. Holloway ran the place with the efficiency of a woman who'd buried 2 husbands and had no patience for nonsense from the living. She took his money without asking questions, though her eyes lingered on the colt visible beneath his duster. "Room's at the end of the hall," she said, handing him a key that looked like it might have unlocked something important once. "No visitors after 10, no gunplay. You break anything, you buy it." "Yes, ma'am. And Mr. Holt." Her eyes widened slightly, but she recovered quick. "Mr. Holt, we run a quiet establishment. I trust that won't be a problem." "No problem at all, ma'am." His room was sparse but clean, a bed with springs that groaned, a washstand with a cracked mirror, and a window that looked out onto an alley where someone had abandoned a wagon wheel. Micah set his saddlebags on the floor and studied his reflection. The years showed in lines around his eyes. In the gray threading through his beard, he looked like a man who'd ridden too many hard trails, which he supposed was true enough. The first order of business was reconnaissance. Micah spent the afternoon walking Dust Vale's dusty streets, noting what had changed and what hadn't. The barber shop where Sam used to get his weekly shave was boarded up. The general store had a new owner, a nervous man who kept glancing toward Langton's Fortune like he expected trouble to come walking out at any moment. The sheriff's office, Micah noticed with grim satisfaction, stood empty. "Been that way near on 6 months," said an old-timer sitting outside the hardware store, whittling a piece of wood into nothing particular. Sheriff Morrison got himself relocated after a disagreement with Mr. Langton about the proper way to handle evidence. "That's so?" The old man spat tobacco juice into the dust. "That's so. These days. Mr. Langton's boys handle any law-keeping needs to arise, efficient-like." As evening painted the sky purple, Micah found himself drawn to Langton's Fortune like a moth to flame. The place was exactly what he'd expected, all false fronts and empty promises. Red velvet curtains framed windows that glowed with lamplight, the sounds of a poorly tuned piano mixed with the clink of glasses and chips. Men stumbled in hopeful and staggered out broken. He pushed through the bat-wing doors into a haze of cigar smoke and desperation. The main floor held a dozen gaming tables. Poker, faro, roulette. Each one a carefully baited trap. Bar girls in low-cut dresses moved between the tables, keeping drinks full and spirits high enough to ensure poor judgment. At the far end of the room, a curved staircase led to the upper floors where other appetites were satisfied. Micah ordered whiskey at the bar and turned to survey the room. He spotted Langton immediately. A man that prosperous and that cruel was hard to miss. He held court at a private table, surrounded by hard men who watched the room with professional vigilance. Langton himself was smaller than Micah had imagined, neat as a pin in a black suit that probably cost more than most folks in Dustvale saw in a year. His hands, Micah noticed, were soft and manicured, hands that had never known honest work. Movement on the stairs caught his eye. A woman descended, and the room seemed to pause in its revelry to watch. She moved like smoke, deliberate but somehow insubstantial, as if she might dissipate at any moment. Her dress was midnight blue, modest compared to the working girls, but somehow more arresting for it. Dark hair piled high exposed a neck like alabaster. But it was her eyes that held Micah, gray as winter storm clouds and just as unpredictable. Clara Langton. Had to be. She glided through the room without acknowledging the stairs, stopping at her father's table just long enough to whisper something that made him frown. Then she was moving again, this time toward a corner where a woman sat alone, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Clara bent low, pressed something into the woman's hand, and whispered words that transformed tears to tentative hope. Interesting. A commotion near the roulette wheel drew everyone's attention. A man in worn overalls was backing away from the table, hands raised in supplication. "I'm good for it, Mr. Langton. You know I am. Just need till harvest. Harold." Langton's voice cut through the noise like a straight razor. "Harold. Harold. We've had this conversation before, haven't we?" "Yes, sir, but nothing." Langton nodded to his men. Two of them grabbed Harold's arms while a third drove a fist into his stomach. The man doubled over, gasping. They dragged him toward the back entrance, past tables where men suddenly found their drinks fascinating. Micah's hand drifted toward his gun, muscle memory from a dozen similar scenes, but this wasn't the time. Not yet. He forced his fingers to relax, to wrap around his whiskey glass instead of iron. Clara had gone very still during the violence, her face a mask. But Micah caught the way her hands clenched in her skirts, the slight tremor in her jaw. When her father returned to his cards as if nothing had happened, she turned and headed for a door marked private. Their eyes met across the smoky room. Just for a moment, no longer than a heartbeat, but Micah felt the impact like a physical blow. Those storm cloud eyes held his, and in them he saw something that might have been recognition, not of him personally, but of what he represented, of why he was here. Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded final as a coffin lid. Micah finished his whiskey and left. Outside, he found Harold propped against a wall, blood running from his nose. The man's eyes were glazed with shock and pain. "You should see Doc Pritchard about that nose," Micah said, helping him to his feet. "Can't afford no doctor." Harold's voice came out thick. "Can't afford nothing now." Micah pressed a few bills into the man's hand. "Sure you can." He left Harold staring at the money like he'd never seen currency before and made his way back to the boarding house. The streets were quieter now, though light and noise still spilled from the saloons. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The wind had died down, leaving the night air still and heavy with the scent of sage and secrets. In his room, Micah sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out Samuel's photograph again. In the lamplight, his brother's face seemed to flicker between laughter and accusation. "I saw him. Sam. Saw the man who killed you, sitting there like a king while better men bleed in the dust." He set the photograph on the nightstand, positioning it so Samuel's eyes would watch the door. Then he checked his weapons, the Colt .45 at his hip, the hideout gun in his boot, the knife in his belt. Old habits, but they'd kept him alive this long. Sleep came hard that night. Every time Micah closed his eyes, He saw Clara Langton descending those stairs, moving through that den of iniquity like something pure navigating hell. He'd come to Dustvale for justice, for blood if necessary. He hadn't expected complications, but then the desert had a way of changing plans. And those storm cloud eyes promised their own kind of tempest. The next 3 days, Micah became a shadow in Dustvale. He watched and waited, learning the rhythms of the town like a hunter studying prey. Langton's fortune operated on a schedule as predictable as sunrise. Doors opened at noon. Serious gambling started by 3, and by midnight the place roared with desperate energy. But it was the quiet hours that interested Micah most. The early mornings when Clara Langton emerged from the casino's side entrance. She always wore simple dresses then, browns and grays that helped her blend with the townspeople, a basket on her arm, a shawl, despite the heat. She'd visit the Mexican quarter first, where the poorest families clustered in adobe huts. Then to the widow Thompson's house, where 6 children tried to survive on washing and mending. The old Chinese herbalist behind the laundry, the crippled war veteran who swept floors at the saloon. Each stop, she'd leave something, food, medicine, sometimes coins wrapped in brown paper, quick as a hummingbird, never staying long enough for proper thanks. Micah followed at a distance, intrigued by this strange mathematics where Langton's fortune took with one hand while his daughter gave with the other. On the 4th morning, trouble found them both. Clara had just left the baker's, where Micah knew she'd paid double for day-old bread. When Jake Briggs stumbled out of an alley, Langton's enforcer was drunk despite the early hour, his clothes disheveled from whatever entertainment the night had provided. His eyes lit up when he saw Clara, an ugly smile spreading across his unshaven face. Well, little Miss High and Mighty out playing Angel again. He moved to block her path, swaying slightly. Your daddy know you're out here mixing with the common folk. Good morning, Mr. Briggs. Clara's voice stayed level, but Micah saw her shift her weight, ready to run. I'm sure you have somewhere to be. Matter of fact, I don't... Briggs reached for her arm. Been meaning to have a conversation with you about your charitable activities. Some might say you're undermining your father's business model. Clara tried to step around him. He grabbed her wrist, yanking her close enough that she must have smelled the whiskey and sweat on him. Let go. Still calm, but with steel underneath. Or what? You'll tell Daddy. He's got bigger concerns than... Micah's fist connected with Briggs's jaw before the man could finish. The enforcer stumbled backward, releasing Clara, his hand going for the gun at his hip. But drunk and surprised made for slow reflexes. Micah already had his Colt drawn. The barrel centered on Briggs's chest. The lady asked you to let go. Briggs froze, his bloodshot eyes trying to focus. Who the hell are you? Someone who thinks you should find better ways to spend your mornings. Now move along. For a moment, violence hung in the air like dust before a storm. Then Briggs spat blood onto the street, backed away with his hands visible. This ain't over. Stranger, Mr. Langton don't take kindly to folks interfering with his employees. I'll keep that in mind. Briggs staggered off, throwing dark looks over his shoulder. Micah waited until he'd turned the corner before holstering his weapon. When he looked back, Clara stood studying him with those storm cloud eyes. I didn't need your help, she said. Didn't say you did. Then why? Micah shrugged. Man shouldn't put hands on a woman. Don't matter whose daughter she is. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. You're the one who's been watching me, following me on my rounds. No point denying it. Guilty as charged. Why? She asked again. And this time the word carried weight. Curious. I suppose. Don't often see someone trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teacup. Clara's laugh was bitter as winter wind. Is that what I'm doing? Aren't you? She looked at him for a long moment, and Micah had the unsettling feeling she was seeing straight through to his bones. You're Samuel Holt's brother, the gunfighter. The words hit like cold water. Micah kept his face neutral, but she must have seen something because she nodded. I remember that night, the argument, the accusations. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The gunshot. Then you know why I'm here. Yes. She pulled her shawl tighter despite the warming air. Though I wonder if you know the whole truth of it. I know enough. My brother's dead. Your father killed him. My father ordered him killed. There's a difference, though I doubt it matters to you. Clara glanced around the empty street. You shouldn't have helped me. Jake Briggs has a long memory and a short temper. I've dealt with worse. I'm sure you have, but this is Dust Vale. My father owns every soul in this town, one way or another, even mine. She started to leave, then paused. Especially mine. You could leave. The look she gave him might have been pity. Could I? Where would I go? What would I do? I'm Edward Langton's daughter. That's a brand that doesn't wash off. She walked away before he could respond, her basket swinging gently at her side. Micah watched her go, troubled by the resignation in her voice. He'd expected Langton's daughter to be cut from the same cloth, cruel, greedy, careless with others' lives. He hadn't expected this quiet woman distributing mercy in measured doses, trying to balance scales that could never be balanced. That evening, a sandstorm rolled in from the west. It came fast, the sky turning yellow-brown as a wall of dust advanced across the desert. People scrambled for shelter, securing shutters and bringing in anything the wind might claim. Micah helped Mrs. Holloway board up the boarding house windows, then headed out to check on his horse at the livery. The streets emptied quick as the storm hit. Sand stung exposed skin like needles, and the wind howled between buildings with an almost human voice. Micah pulled his bandana up over his nose and mouth. Squinting against the onslaught, visibility dropped to maybe 10 feet. He was passing the old Wells Fargo office when he heard the crash. Through the swirling dust, he saw a figure struggling with a door that the wind kept slamming shut. Clara Langton, caught out in the storm. This way! He grabbed her arm, guiding her to the abandoned building. The door was boarded, but loose. A few kicks and they were inside, stumbling into dusty darkness as the storm raged outside. Clara coughed, lowering the scarf she'd wrapped around her face. Thank you, again. You have a talent for finding trouble. Or it has a talent for finding me. She looked around the empty office, at the broken furniture and scattered papers. I used to hide here when I was young, when Father's moods grew dark. Micah found an old lamp with some oil still in it, managed to get it lit. The yellow light pushed back the shadows, revealing a space frozen in time, ledgers still open on desks, a calendar showing a date 3 years past. What happened here? Father happened. Clara settled onto a dusty bench. The Wells Fargo manager questioned some discrepancies in shipping manifests, suggested that certain cargo coming through Dust Vale might not match the paperwork. Smuggling. Among other things, the manager disappeared one night. They found him in the desert a week later. Coyotes hadn't left much. She said it matter-of-factly, like discussing weather. The office closed soon after. Outside, the storm intensified. Sand found every crack in the boards, forming small drifts in corners. The building groaned under the wind's assault. They might be here a while. Why do you stay? Micah asked, settling across from her. You clearly hate what he does. Do you have siblings, Mr. Holt, besides Samuel? No. Then you can understand. My mother died birthing me. I'm all he has, and despite everything, he's all I have. She pulled her knees up, making herself smaller. He wasn't always cruel. Or maybe he was, and I was too young to see it. But there were moments, teaching me to ride, reading to me by firelight. Those memories make leaving harder than you'd think. The lamp flame flickered, casting dancing shadows. In this light, Clara looked younger, more vulnerable. Micah found himself wanting to offer comfort but not knowing how. Tell me about Samuel, she said suddenly. The request surprised him. Why? Because I was there that night, watching from the stairs. I saw a man accused of cheating. I saw my father's rage, but I never saw the person. She met his eyes. Tell me who he was. So Micah did. He talked about Sam's laugh that could fill a room, his terrible singing voice that never stopped him from singing, the way he could gentle any horse, charm any woman, make friends of enemies, his dreams of starting a ranch, settling down, having a passel of kids to carry on the Holt name. He wasn't a gambler, Micah finished. Not really. Just thought he could make enough for a down payment on land. One big score and out. They all think that. Clara's voice was soft. Every man who sits at those tables thinks he's the exception. Sam didn't cheat. I know. The simple acknowledgement hit harder than denial would have. They sat in silence while the storm raged, two strangers bound by a death that stood between them like a third presence. Your father, Micah said finally. He needs to answer for what he did. And you'll make him, if necessary. Clara studied him with those gray eyes that seemed to see too much. You're not the first to try. The Hendersons, after their son died in a fixed fight, that bounty hunter from Tucson whose partner disappeared, even a federal marshal once, though he never made it past the town limits. I'm not them. No, she agreed. You're not. You have the look of a man who's already dead inside. That makes you dangerous. The wind was dying down. The howling diminished to a moan. Soon it would be safe to leave, but neither of them moved. I dream about that night sometimes, Clara said quietly. About what might have happened if I'd spoken up, told the truth about what I saw. What did you see? Jake Briggs, palming cards from his sleeve when he dealt, setting your brother up to take the fall when someone noticed the deck was dirty. Her voice turned bitter again. But I was 17 and terrified, and I kept quiet like a coward. Micah felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of anger that had lived there so long he'd forgotten what its absence might feel like. Not forgiveness, that wasn't his to give, but understanding. Maybe you were a child. I was old enough to know right from wrong. Knowing and doing are different things, especially when doing might get you killed. Clara looked at him with something like gratitude. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving an eerie quiet in its wake. She stood, shaking dust from her skirts. We should go. If someone saw us come in here together, your reputation would suffer. Yours would. A stranger spending time with Langton's daughter, that's painting a target on your back. They left separately. Clara first, while Micah waited a decent interval. When he finally emerged, the town looked transformed. Dust coated everything in a uniform brown, like the desert had tried to reclaim what humans had stolen. People emerged from buildings, sweeping stoops and shaking out rugs. The eternal battle against the encroaching sand. At the boarding house, Mrs. Holloway gave him a knowing look when he came in dust-covered and late for supper. But she said nothing, just served him cold stew and cornbread without comment. The other boarders, a traveling salesman and two miners passing through, talked about the storm and ignored him, which suited Micah fine. That night, he lay awake thinking about Clara Langton, about the weight she carried and the careful way she parceled out kindness like a miser with gold, about storm cloud eyes that had watched his brother die and haunted her still. He'd come to Dust Vale with a simple plan: find proof of Langton's guilt, then deliver justice at the end of a gun if the law wouldn't act. Now things were complicated. The daughter who should have been his enemy was instead... What? He didn't have a word for it yet. Through the thin walls came the sound of someone crying, one of the other boarders, probably, touched by whatever private sorrow had driven them to this forgotten corner of the world. Dust Vale collected the broken and desperate like a basin collected rainwater, and now he was one of them, drawn by his own pain to this place of dust and shattered dreams. Tomorrow he would continue his hunt for evidence, talk to more people who'd been there that night, build a case that even a bought judge couldn't ignore. And if that failed, well, he had other means of ensuring justice. But tonight, he thought about a woman in a dusty building, speaking truth in the dark while the desert tried to bury them both, about the way lamplight caught in her hair and the sadness that lived in her voice like a permanent resident. Complications, always complications. The wind picked up again outside, gentler now. carrying the scent of sage and the promise of another scorching day to come. Somewhere out there. Clara Langton was probably lying awake too, wondering what she'd set in motion by speaking Samuel's name aloud. Micah touched the gun beside his bed, a reflexive check that had become ritual. Justice would come. He'd sworn that on his brother's grave. But for the first time since he'd started this journey, he wondered what price that justice might demand, and who would pay it in the end. Clara's first gift came 3 days after the sandstorm. A small leather journal slipped under Micah's door while he slept. Inside, pages of careful handwriting documented dates, names, amounts, the secret ledger of Edward Langton's off-the-books operations, debts collected through violence, games rigged to fleece travelers, shipments that came through Dustvale with one manifest and left with another, and there, marked with a black star, S. Holt, September 15th, accused of marking cards. J. B. planted evidence. E. L. ordered enforcement. Body moved to cemetery before dawn. Micah stared at the entry until the words blurred. Evidence. Real evidence. In Langton's own hand. His fingers trembled as he turned pages, finding more deaths, more cruelty, more lives destroyed for profit. Clara had given him a weapon more powerful than any gun. He found her that evening at the cemetery, kneeling at a grave marked Beloved Mother. The setting sun painted everything gold and shadow. She didn't turn when he approached, but her shoulders tensed. This could get you killed, he said. Many things could. She traced letters on the headstone with one finger. Did you find what you needed? And more. Why now? Why help me? Clara rose, brushing dust from her dark dress. In the dying light, she looked ethereal, like something that might vanish if he blinked. Because I'm tired of being complicit through silence. Because your brother's ghost won't let me sleep. Because maybe if there's justice for him, there might be redemption for me. You were 17. I'm not anymore. She turned to face him fully. I know where he keeps other records. Documents that show connections to judges, marshals, even a senator. But getting them means going into his private study. No, too dangerous. Everything here is dangerous. Mr. Holt, at least this danger might lead somewhere better. They stood among the graves as darkness gathered. 2 people caught between the living and the dead. Micah wanted to tell her to leave town, to run far from her father's shadow, but he knew she wouldn't, just as he couldn't leave without finishing what he'd come for. There's a man, Clara said quietly. Thomas Brennan. He used to work the tables at the Fortune. Lives out past Cooper's Ridge now. Drinking himself to death. He was there that night. Saw everything. Will he talk? To you. Maybe. If you catch him sober enough to remember but drunk enough to not care about consequences. She pulled her shawl tighter. I should go. Father's been watching me closer since the incident with Briggs. Clara. Her name felt strange on his tongue. Too intimate for what they were. Be careful. Something shifted in her expression, a softening that made her look younger. You too, Micah. She left him among the dead, her footsteps silent on the packed earth. Micah remained, reading headstones in the gathering dark. So many young deaths, so many dreams buried in this hard soil. His brother's grave looked no different from the rest. Just another casualty of Dustvale's particular brand of justice. The ride to Cooper's Ridge took 2 hours through rough country. Micah found Brennan's shack by following the smell of rot-gut whiskey and despair. The man who answered his knock had the yellowed eyes and shaking hands of a dedicated drunk, but intelligence still flickered in his gaze. Thomas Brennan? Who's asking? Someone interested in the truth about what happened to Samuel Holt. Brennan's face went pale beneath its whiskey flush. Don't know nothing about that. Clara Langton thinks different. The mention of Clara's name worked like a key. Brennan stepped aside, gesturing Micah into a one-room shack that reeked of unwashed man and broken dreams. Empty bottles covered most surfaces. A deck of cards sat on the table, a game of solitaire half-finished. She helped my wife, Brennan said, collapsing into a chair. When the consumption took her. Brought medicine? Paid for the doctor? Only kindness we saw in this hellhole. He reached for a bottle, hands shaking. What do you want to know? Everything. So Brennan talked. How Jake Briggs had been losing heavy that night, desperate to make back what he'd borrowed from Langton. How he'd started palming cards, clumsy with drink and desperation. How when another player noticed the dirty deck, Briggs had stood fast and pointed at Samuel. Your brother, he tried to defend himself, said to check Briggs's sleeves, but Langton wouldn't hear it. His own man cheating? That would be bad for business. Brennan took a long pull from the bottle. So he made an example instead. Had 3 men hold your brother while Briggs put a bullet in him. Then they dumped the body and put word out that Samuel Holt had been caught cheating and paid the price. You saw all this? I dealt that table. Saw every card that passed through every hand. Brennan's laugh was bitter. Left town the next morning. But you can't run from some things. They follow you. Would you testify if it came to trial? Brennan's laugh turned darker. Trial? In Dustvale? Boy, you're either naive or crazy. Maybe both. Micah pulled out gold coins, set them on the table. There's a federal judge coming through in 2 weeks. Real law, not Langton's version. And you think I'd live long enough to testify? But Brennan's eyes stayed on the gold. Even if I wanted to. Who'd believe a drunk? Other people will come forward. Once someone starts telling truth, it has a way of spreading. Brennan stared at the coins like they might bite him. Finally, he swept them into his hand. 2 weeks. If I'm still breathing, maybe I'll remember something useful. Micah left him to his bottles and guilt, riding back under stars sharp as accusations. The desert at night had its own beauty. Silver sage and black shadows. The distant howl of coyotes. The clean smell of creosote after the day's heat. It was a hard land that made hard people, or broke them entirely. He was so lost in thought that he almost missed the riders until too late. 3 men, waiting where the trail narrowed between 2 ridges. Micah's hand found his gun as he reined in his horse. Evening, friend. The lead rider struck a match, lighting a cigarette. In the brief flare, Micah recognized one of Langton's enforcers. Bit late for a ride? Free country. That's debatable. The man exhaled smoke. Mister, Langton wants a word. Thought we'd save you the trip back to town. 3 guns to his 1, and they had positioning. Micah calculated odds. Didn't like them. Lead the way. They rode in silence, his escort boxing him in neat as you please. Instead of heading to the Fortune, they turned north, toward the old mining camps. After 20 minutes, lights appeared. A sprawling hacienda that must have predated the town itself. Money had restored it to glory. All white walls and red tile, like something transplanted from old Mexico. Edward Langton waited in a study that would have looked at home in New York or San Francisco. Books, leather-bound and probably unread. Paintings of fox hunts and English countryside. The man himself stood by a window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the desert night. Mr. Holt, good of you to accept my invitation. Didn't feel like I had much choice. Langton turned, up close. He was smaller than he'd seemed in the casino, but his eyes were cold as winter stones. There's always a choice. That's what makes life interesting. He gestured to a chair. Sit, we have matters to discuss. Micah remained standing. Such as? You've been making inquiries about an old incident, disturbing the peace, you might say. Bad for business? Your business? Maybe. The only business that matters in Dustvale. Langton poured himself brandy from a crystal decanter. Didn't offer any to Micah? I knew your brother. Ambitious young man. Unfortunate. What happened? Murder usually is... Langton's eyes narrowed. Careful with your words. Mr. Holt. Accusations have consequences. So does killing innocent men. Innocent. Langton tasted the word like the brandy. Interesting concept. Was he innocent when he sat at my table, trying to take what others had earned? When he reached for more than his station allowed? He didn't cheat. Didn't he? Perhaps not with cards, but there are other forms of deception. Langton set down his glass. moved closer. Despite his size, he radiated menace. Let me be clear. Your brother's death was regrettable but necessary. Order must be maintained. Rules must be enforced. Without that, we have chaos. Your rules, your order. Yes, my town, my rules. Langton returned to his desk, opened a drawer. For a moment, Micah tensed, expecting a weapon. Instead, Langton pulled out a leather pouch, heavy with coin. $5,000, more than most men see in a lifetime. Take it and leave. Tonight. Don't come back. Blood money. Practical money. Your brother is dead. Nothing changes that, but you're alive. That could change. Langton pushed the pouch across the desk. I'm not an unreasonable man. I understand the desire for revenge. But I also understand survival. Choose wisely. Micah looked at the money, then at Langton. In that moment, he understood Clara's burden more clearly. This was her father, this cold, calculating man who weighed lives in gold and found them wanting. Keep your money. Langton sighed. I expected as much. Honor, principle, noble concepts that look fine on a gravestone. He nodded to his men. Escort, mister. Holt back to town. Make sure he arrives safely. This time, the ride back was tense, silent. They left him at the boarding house with a final warning. Mister, Langton's generosity has limits. Don't test them. Inside, Micah found his room had been searched. Nothing taken, but the message was clear. They knew who he was, what he wanted, where he slept. The leather journal was still hidden where he'd left it, inside a cut in his saddle that looked like wear. But for how long? He was checking his weapons when a soft knock came. He opened the door to find Clara, wrapped in a dark cloak. Fear brightened her eyes. I heard they took you to him. Word travels fast. Everything travels fast in Dust Vale. She slipped inside, closing the door behind her. What did he offer? Money, the usual. And? I'm still here. Something passed over her face. Relief, maybe, or worry. He'll try once more. Father believes in the rule of three. Bribe, threaten, then... She didn't finish. I know. They stood close in the small room, awareness crackling between them like lightning looking for ground. Clara reached up, touched the bruise on his jaw from the escort's none too gentle encouragement. Her fingers were cool, gentle. You should have taken the money. Left. Would you have? I can't leave. This place, these people. They're my responsibility, my burden. Her hand dropped. But you could be free. No one's free who leaves their brother unavenged. And when you have your revenge, what then? Micah had no answer. His life had narrowed to this single purpose. He couldn't see past it, didn't want to. But looking at Clara, something in him wondered for the first time what might come after. I found something, she said, reaching into her cloak. Another journal, this one bound in red leather. Financial records, names, dates, amounts. Enough to interest that federal judge, if you can keep it safe. Clara, no, you've done enough. Have I? Have I done nearly enough to balance the scales? She pressed the journal into his hands. There's a dance tomorrow night, a social event to celebrate the fortune's anniversary. Everyone important will be there, including certain business associates who might not appreciate their dealings becoming public. You're asking me to walk into a room full of enemies. I'm telling you that sometimes the best place to hide is in plain sight. She moved toward the door, paused. Wear something decent. Father's parties have standards. Then she was gone, leaving only the scent of lavender and the weight of more dangerous knowledge. Micah sat on his bed, looking at the two journals. Evidence enough to destroy Langton, if he could live long enough to use it. Outside, Dust Vale slept its uneasy sleep, but Micah lay awake, thinking about rules of three and women who carried towns on their shoulders and the price of justice in a place that had forgotten its meaning. Tomorrow he'd walk into the monster's lair, surrounded by those who'd cheerfully see him dead. But tonight, He touched his jaw where Clara's fingers had been and wondered if revenge was still the only thing worth living for, or if somewhere in this poisoned town, something else was taking root, something that might survive even if he didn't. The desert wind whispered secrets through the gaps in the walls, and Micah listened, learning the language of a land that buried its dead without markers and grew flowers from their bones. The Fortune's anniversary celebration transformed Dust Vale's main street into something almost civilized. Chinese lanterns swayed between buildings, casting colored shadows on faces more accustomed to squinting through dust. Music drifted from the casino, a proper orchestra imported from El Paso, not the usual out-of-tune piano. Even the desert seemed to hold its breath, the usual evening wind dying to nothing. Micah adjusted the borrowed suit jacket, feeling like a wolf dressed for a sheep's party. Mrs. Holloway had produced the outfit from her late husband's things, tisking over the fit but declaring it would do. The gun at his hip felt conspicuous beneath the formal wear, but leaving it behind would be suicide. Inside the Fortune, Langton had spared no expense. Crystal chandeliers threw light across tables covered in white linen. Women in silk gowns that cost more than most locals saw in a year danced with men who'd gotten rich on others' misfortune. The regular gaming tables had been cleared, replaced by a polished dance floor where couples moved in patterns Micah half-remembered from a life before gunsmoke and graveyards. He spotted Clara immediately. She wore emerald green that caught the light like deep water. Her dark hair swept up to reveal the elegant line of her neck. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, playing the dutiful daughter to perfection. But Micah caught the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes swept the room like a scout checking terrain. Mr. Holt. Edward Langton appeared at his elbow, neat as a pin in evening wear that made him look like a successful banker rather than a small-town tyrant. I'm surprised to see you here. Your daughter suggested I attend, said it would be educational. Did she now? Langton's smile could have frosted windows. Clara has always been too generous with invitations. I trust you'll remember you're here as a guest. Guests behave themselves. Of course. Langton studied him a moment longer, then drifted away to greet other arrivals. Micah accepted champagne from a passing server, imported, no doubt, like everything else tonight. He moved through the crowd, noting faces, exits, the positions of Langton's men trying to look festive while keeping hands near weapons. You clean up passable. Clara materialized beside him during a break in the music. This close, he could see the strain behind her society smile. High praise. Your father doesn't seem pleased I'm here. Father's rarely pleased about anything. Dance with me. It wasn't a request. The orchestra struck up a waltz, and suddenly Micah found himself on the floor with Clara in his arms. She moved like water, following his uncertain lead with a grace that made him look better than he was. I didn't know you danced, she said. Mother insisted, said even ranch boys should know how to act civilized. He hadn't thought about those lessons in years. His mother patient in their small parlor while Sam laughed from the doorway. Didn't think I'd remember. Bodies remember what minds forget. Clara's hand was light in his, but her eyes stayed alert. Senator Morrison is here, the thin man by the roulette wheel. He's been taking Langton money for years, and Judge Harper, there in the blue vest. He'll be presiding over any trials in the territory. Micah turned them smoothly, getting a better look. Both men clustered around Langton like moths to flame, laughing too loud at his jokes. The web of corruption spread wider than he'd imagined. The federal judge? 2 days early, staying at the Regent Hotel under an assumed name. I've arranged for the journals to be delivered to him tonight. Clara's voice stayed conversational, but her grip tightened slightly. After that, things will move quickly. You shouldn't be involved. Stop! The word came sharp despite her smile. I've been involved since the night they killed your brother. Since before that, even every time I kept quiet, every time I looked away, I became more complicit. Let me do this. The music swirled around them, violin and piano weaving patterns in the air. Other couples moved past in a blur of silk and jewelry. For a moment, Micah let himself imagine this was real, just a man dancing with a woman. No blood between them. No justice waiting to be served. After, Clara said quietly, after all this ends, what will you do? Haven't thought that far. You should. Revenge is a destination, not a life. She met his eyes fully. I've been planning my after since I was 17. Every coin I saved, every ally I cultivated. When Father falls, this town will need rebuilding. I intend to see it done right. And if he doesn't fall, if the judge is bought like the others, then I suppose we'll both be dead, and it won't matter. She said it calmly, like discussing weather. Micah felt something twist in his chest, admiration mixed with fear for her. This woman who looked delicate as spun glass but had a spine of steel wire. The song ended. Clara stepped back, curtsied properly. Thank you for the dance, Mr. Holt. I should see to the other guests. She glided away, leaving Micah oddly bereft. He retreated to the edge of the room, watching Langton hold court. The man commanded the space like a general, dispersing favors and threats with equal ease. Hard to imagine bringing him down with paper and ink rather than lead. Enjoying yourself? Jake Briggs appeared, his formal wear fitting him like a bad suit on a scarecrow. The bruise Micah had given him had faded to yellow-green. Fascinating party. Yeah, fascinating. Briggs leaned close, whiskey thick on his breath. Saw you dancing with the boss's daughter. Friendly advice. That's a good way to end up fertilizing the desert. Appreciate the concern. No concern. Just hate to see a man die stupid. Briggs grinned, ugly and knowing. Course, maybe you got a death wish. Coming here, stirring up old trouble. Man like that might do any fool thing. Before Micah could respond, commotion erupted near the entrance. A young man in a cavalry uniform pushed through the crowd, dust still on his boots. He made straight for Langton, whispered urgently. Micah saw Langton's face change, the mask of genial host cracking to show something darker underneath. Clara appeared at Micah's elbow. Something's wrong. Langton was already moving, gathering his key men with sharp gestures. The party continued, but tension rippled through those in the know. Langton paused at the door, his eyes finding Micah across the room. The look promised nothing good. We need to leave, Clara said. Now. But it was too late. Langton's men were already moving to block the exits. Casual but effective, the trap had been sprung, though Micah didn't yet know its nature. Ladies and gentlemen, Langton's voice cut through the music. The orchestra stuttered to silence. I've just received disturbing news. It seems we have a thief among us. The crowd murmured, pressing closer. Langton stood at the top of the stairs, commanding the room. Certain private documents have gone missing from my study, documents that could be misinterpreted by those who don't understand the complexities of business. His eyes found Micah again. I'm sure it's a misunderstanding, but until these papers are returned, I'm afraid no one can leave. Father, Clara stepped forward, every inch the concerned daughter. Surely you don't suspect your guests. I suspect everyone, my dear, even family. The threat in his voice was clear. Jake, search the premises. Start with our newer arrivals. What followed was theater, Micah realized. A show for the important guests, demonstrating Langton's control. Men were patted down, women's bags examined with apologies. When they reached Micah, Briggs made a show of the search, hands rough enough to send a message. Clean, Briggs announced, disappointed. Of course he is, Clara said coolly. Mr. Holt has been with me most of the evening. When would he have had opportunity for theft? Dangerous words. Claiming him publicly, in front of her father and his associates. Langton's face went very still. Indeed. And where were you earlier? My dear, you seem to have been absent during the early festivities. Attending to party preparations, as you asked. Father and daughter faced each other across the room. A lifetime of careful deception balanced on a knife's edge. The crowd sensed blood in the water, leaning in with the avidity of those who lived on others' misfortune. Then, salvation from an unexpected source. One of Langton's men rushed in. holding the red leather journal. "Found it, boss. Hidden in the old mission. Still wrapped for delivery." Langton took the journal, flipped through it with visible relief. "A misunderstanding. As I said, please, everyone, return to the celebration. The night is young." The music resumed. Couples returning to the floor. But the mood had shifted. Micah felt the noose loosening slightly. The federal judge wouldn't get the journals tonight, but at least their plan hadn't been fully exposed. Clara drifted back to him during the confusion. "The other journal?" "Safe, not on me." "Good, we'll need to—" She stopped, looking past him. "Father's watching. Dance with me again. Make it look like you're just another fortune hunter chasing the rich man's daughter." They returned to the floor, but this dance felt different, charged with the danger of the moment, the narrow escape. Clara was breathing faster, a flush on her cheeks that wasn't from exertion. "He knows," she said quietly. "Maybe not the specifics, but he knows I'm involved. You should leave. Tonight, I can—" "No." Her fingers tightened on his. "I won't run. Not anymore." She looked up at him, and for a moment the mask dropped entirely. "I'm tired of being afraid, Micah, of living half a life in the shadows of his crimes." The song was ending. Around them, Dust Vale's elite played at being civilized while the rot festered beneath. Micah made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week ago. "Come with me." "What?" "When this is over, when your father's facing justice and this town starts healing, come with me." He didn't know where the words came from, only that they felt right. "You don't have to carry this place forever." Clara's eyes went wide, then soft. For a heartbeat, she looked young and hopeful, the woman she might have been in a different life. Then reality reasserted itself. "Ask me again," she said. "When it's finished. When we know who survived." The music stopped. She stepped back, but her eyes held his a moment longer. A promise, maybe, or a farewell. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of careful conversations and watching eyes. Micah left when enough others had departed to make it unremarkable. Outside, the colored lanterns swayed in a breeze that smelled of coming rain. Storm season in the desert, when flash floods could reshape the landscape overnight. Walking back to the boarding house, he noticed the tail immediately. Not Briggs this time. A professional who knew his business. Micah led him on a winding path through town, then doubled back through an alley he'd scouted days ago. When the man rounded the corner, Micah was waiting. The fight was brief, silent. The man was good, but Micah had been surviving on skill and instinct longer. When it was done, the follower lay unconscious in the dust, breathing but unlikely to wake soon. Micah searched him quickly, finding something that made his blood run cold. A telegram, sent from El Paso that afternoon. Federal judge delayed by weather, arriving in 4 days, not 2. Which meant Clara's information had been wrong, or she'd been fed false details. Either way, they'd lost their advantage. Langton had time to prepare, to clean up loose ends, including them. Back at the boarding house, Micah barricaded his door and checked his weapons. Through the thin walls came the sounds of normal life. Someone snoring, a couple arguing about money, a drunk singing off-key. But underneath it all, he felt the storm building. Not just in the clouds gathering overhead, but in the very bones of the town. He thought about Clara in that green dress, talking about after like it was a real possibility, about the way she'd felt in his arms, solid and real and brave, about promises made while dancing that might never be kept. The first drops of rain hit his window, herald of the deluge to come. Micah settled in to wait for dawn, knowing it would bring either justice or death, maybe both. But for the first time since he'd ridden into Dust Vale, he had something beyond revenge to fight for. Someone who made after seem worth reaching, even if the odds of getting there grew slimmer by the hour. The gunfire erupted just after sunset, shattering the evening calm like breaking glass. Micah had been meeting with Thomas Brennan in the back room of Murphy's saloon when Langton's men kicked in the door. No warnings, no attempts at arrest, just hot lead and killing intent. Brennan took the first bullet, spinning backward over a card table in a spray of whiskey and blood. Micah dove behind the bar as wood splintered around him, drawing and firing in one smooth motion. His first shot caught an attacker in the shoulder, sending him stumbling back through the doorway. "Back door!" Murphy shouted from somewhere in the smoke and chaos. But Micah could already hear boots in the alley. They were boxed in neat as a Christmas present. He counted muzzle flashes. 4, maybe 5 shooters. The mirror behind the bar exploded, showering him with glass. Brennan groaned from the floor, trying to crawl toward cover with one hand pressed to his stomach. Micah broke cover, firing as he moved. 2 shots to drive them back. Then he was hauling Brennan behind an overturned table. The older man's face had gone gray, blood seeping between his fingers. "Go!" Brennan gasped. "I'm done anyway. Shut up and keep pressure on it." More gunfire. Closer now. They were moving in, confident. Micah checked his ammunition. 3 shots left in the cylinder. 1 spare loaded. Not enough for a prolonged fight. Then, unexpected, gunfire from the street. New voices shouting. The distinctive bark of a rifle. Langton's men suddenly had their own problems. In the confusion, Micah spotted his chance. He hefted Brennan over his shoulder and made for the stairs, boots slipping in blood and spilled liquor. The second floor was storage and Murphy's private rooms. Micah kicked open a window overlooking the side alley. Saw it was clear. No good way down carrying a wounded man. But staying meant death. "Can you hold on?" Brennan nodded weakly. Micah holstered his gun, grabbed the man tight, and dropped from the window. They hit hard, Micah's legs buckling but holding. Pain shot through his ankle, twisted but not broken. He half-carried, half-dragged Brennan through the maze of back alleys, following instincts honed by years of staying alive when he shouldn't. Behind them, the gunfight continued, spreading through the saloon district like wildfire. Whatever had started this, it was bigger than just an assassination attempt. Doc Pritchard's house sat on the respectable side of town, white picket fence and climbing roses like something out of a fairy tale. Micah pounded on the back door until the doctor appeared, nightshirt hastily tucked into trousers. "Good Lord, bring him in, quickly!" They laid Brennan on the surgery table, and Pritchard went to work with the efficiency of a man who'd seen too much violence. Micah stood guard at the window, watching the street. Flames now licked at the sky from the direction of Murphy's. Half the town would burn if they didn't get it under control. Will he live? Maybe. Bullets deep. Lot of bleeding. Pritchard didn't look up from his work. "You brought this to my door, Mr. Holt, my wife, my children. I'll be gone as soon as—" The front door burst open. Micah spun, gun raised, then lowered it as Clara stumbled in. Her evening dress was torn, hair wild, a bruise darkening her left cheek. "Thank God," she breathed. "I heard the shooting, thought—" She saw Brennan on the table, went pale. "How bad?" "Bad enough. Clara, what happened to you?" She touched her cheek gingerly. "Father knows about the journals, about everything. He—" Her voice broke slightly, then steadied. "He's placed me under house arrest. I managed to slip out during the chaos. The shooting at Murphy's was meant to eliminate witnesses, but someone warned the Mexicans that Langton was planning to clear out their quarter next. They armed themselves, fought back. The whole town's erupting." She moved to the window beside him. "We don't have long. Father's men will check here soon." Pritchard looked up from his patient. "I won't have violence in my home. You already have it, Doctor," Clara said quietly. "The only question is whether you'll survive it." Heavy footsteps on the porch ended the debate. Micah pushed Clara behind him, checking sight lines. 3 men, maybe 4. The odds kept getting worse. "Holt!" Jake Briggs' voice carried through the door. "We know you're in there. Come out peaceful-like, and maybe the good doctor's family doesn't get caught in the crossfire." Clara grabbed his arm. "Don't! They'll kill you the moment you step outside. They'll kill everyone if I don't—" "No." She moved past him to the door. "Mr. Briggs, this is Clara Langton. I'm coming out. I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. Clara, no! But she was already opening the door, stepping onto the porch with her chin high. Micah heard Briggs curse, the confusion in his voice. Miss Langton, your father's looking for you. Said you were feeling poorly. Needed finding. I felt better. Thought I'd take some air. Her voice was steady, aristocratic. I heard shooting and came to ensure Doctor. Pritchard's family was safe. We can't have innocent people hurt, can we? No, ma'am, but Holt. What about Mr. Holt? I've seen no one by that name. The lie came smooth as silk. Perhaps you should check elsewhere. I'll return home directly. Micah couldn't see Briggs's face, but he could imagine the calculation happening. Langton's daughter, publicly defending the very man they were hunting. The complications that would create. Your father won't like this, miss. Then he can discuss it with me, privately, as family matters should be handled. Steel beneath the silk now. Unless you'd prefer to drag me home by force, I'm sure that would play well with the senator and Judge Harper. Long silence. Then boots retreating. Briggs growling orders to search elsewhere. Clara remained on the porch until they were gone, then sagged against the doorframe. You shouldn't have done that, Micah said, pulling her inside. Probably not. She was shaking now, reaction setting in. But I'm tired of watching from behind windows while people die. He'll come, Pritchard said from the surgery. His hands were red to the wrists, but Brennan's breathing had steadied. Might pull through if infection doesn't set in. Can he be moved? Clara asked. Not for days. Moving him now would kill him certain. Clara turned to Micah. The federal judge, the real one, arrives tomorrow evening on the stage. Father will have men watching every route into town. Then we make sure he never reaches town. Micah was already planning. Hit them before they expect it. Out in the desert where they can't call for help. That's suicide. You against how many? Not just me. He looked at Clara. You said the Mexicans were fighting back. Others too? Understanding dawned in her eyes. The people Father's hurt. The families he's destroyed. They just needed someone to show them it was possible to fight back. Can you reach them? Some, maybe enough. She glanced at Pritchard. Doctor, might we impose on your wife's wardrobe? This dress is somewhat conspicuous. An hour later, Clara left dressed as a respectable doctor's wife, complete with bonnet and market basket. Micah watched from the window until she vanished into the maze of back streets. The shooting had died down, but smoke still rose from multiple fires. Dust Veil was tearing itself apart, years of suppressed rage finally boiling over. She's brave, Pritchard said, washing blood from his hands. Foolish, but brave. Yeah. You know Langton will kill her for this. His own daughter. Not if I kill him first. Pritchard studied him with tired eyes. Violence begets violence. Mr. Holt, when does it end? When the guilty pay for their crimes. And after? When you've had your revenge. After, that word again. Heavy with possibilities he might not live to see. Micah thought of Clara in his arms. Talking about rebuilding. About something beyond the blood and dust. I don't know, he admitted. Might want to figure it out. Man needs a reason to live, not just a reason to kill. Brennan stirred on the table, mumbling through his laudanum haze. Micah caught fragments, something about marked cards and guilty consciences and the weight of truth. Even drugged, the man couldn't escape his ghosts. The night deepened. Micah kept watch while Pritchard tended his patient and worried about his family hidden in the root cellar. Outside, Dust Veil continued its convulsions. Gunfire erupted sporadically, followed by shouts and running feet. Once, a group of riders thundered past, Langton's men by their looks, heading for the Mexican quarter. Near dawn, Clara returned. She slipped in the back door like a shadow, bringing the smell of smoke and revolution. It's done, she said simply. Word spread. When you ride out to meet the judge, you won't ride alone. How many? Enough. The Hernandez brothers, who lost their father to a rigged fight. Mrs. Chen, whose husband died in Langton's mine. Tom Garrett, Sarah Morrison, the Blazer cousins. Others. She swayed on her feet, exhaustion catching up. People who've been ground down so long they forgot they could stand up. Micah caught her as she stumbled, guided her to a chair. This close. He could see the toll the night had taken, smoke smudges on her skin, dried blood on her sleeve that might have been hers or someone else's. Your father, fortified in the casino with his corps men. He knows the town's slipping away. His only chance now is to eliminate the judge before any testimony can be given. She met his eyes. He's put a bounty on you. $5,000, dead or alive. Moving up in the world. This isn't a joke. Micah, every gun in 3 counties will be looking for you. Let them look. By tomorrow night, it'll be over one way or another. She reached up, touched his face like she had once before, but this time her fingers lingered, tracing the line of his jaw. Promise me something. What? If it goes bad, if we fail, run. Don't die for pride. Clara, promise me. Fierce now, desperate. I've lost too much to this place. I won't lose you too. The words hung between them. Admission of something neither had quite named. Micah caught her hand, held it against his cheek. I promise. If you promise the same. I can't run. This is my home. Home's just a place. People make it worth staying. She laughed, soft and sad. When did you become wise? About 5 minutes ago. Dawn light crept through the windows, painting everything gold and shadow. In a few hours, he'd ride out to face whatever waited in the desert. But for now, in this borrowed moment, he held Clara's hand and let himself imagine after. Pritchard cleared his throat from the doorway. Not to interrupt, but we have a problem. Brennan's fever's spiking. If it breaks toward brain fever. The moment shattered. Clara pulled away. All business again. What do you need? Willow bark extract, ice if we can find any, and prayer. I'll handle the first 2, Clara said. The third's on you, doctor. She left again, and Micah returned to his watch. The sun climbed higher, burning off the dawn coolness. Somewhere out there, a federal judge was approaching, carrying the hope of justice. And somewhere else, Edward Langton waited with all his terrible power, ready to crush that hope before it could bloom. The lines were drawn. The players chosen. All that remained was to see who'd be standing when the dust settled. Micah checked his guns one more time, then settled in to wait. Whatever came next, it would come soon. And when it did, he'd be ready. For Samuel, for Clara, for all the ghosts that haunted Dustvale's bloody ground. For after, if such a thing existed for men like him. The Apache who found Micah was old enough to remember when his people ruled this desert. He emerged from the rocks like a ghost made flesh, leading a paint pony and carrying the kind of wisdom that came from outliving enemies and friends alike. Micah woke to find the man studying his wounds with dark, patient eyes. You are the one who challenges Langton, the old man said in accented English. It wasn't a question. Micah tried to sit up, gasped as fire shot through his side. The ambush flashed back, riding hard for where the judge would pass. Langton's men waiting in the canyon, bullets singing death through the afternoon air. He'd taken 2 in the side, 1 in the shoulder, before his horse went down. Should have died there in the dust with the others. Easy, the Apache said. The bullets are out. You have been walking the Spirit Road for 3 days. 3 days. The judge would have reached Dustvale by now, or been killed trying. Either way, Micah had failed. The knowledge sat heavy as stones in his gut. Why? He asked through cracked lips. Why save me? The old man's face creased in what might have been a smile. Langton took my grandson. Said he stole horses. Had him hanged without trial. The boy was 12 summers. He handed Micah a gourd of water. Enemy of my enemy. The water tasted of minerals and salvation. Micah drank carefully, feeling his body remember it wanted to live. Around them, the shelter was simple, a lean-to of branches and hide, invisible from 10 feet away. Through the opening, he could see red rocks and endless sky. My horse? Dead. Your friends also. The Hernandez brothers, Tom Garrett, others who'd ridden out with hope for justice, all gone now, fed to the desert's endless hunger. And Clara, God, what had happened to Clara? I need to get back. You need to heal. The Apache, he never gave his name, busied himself with a pot over a small fire. Langton's men search. They say you are dead, but still they search. This tells me something. What? That someone important does not believe you died. The old man ladled out broth that smelled of sage and rabbit. Drink, strength first, then revenge. So Micah drank and slept and slowly mended. The Apache tended him with the same patience he probably showed tracking game. No hurry, no wasted motion. He spoke little, but what he said carried weight. Stories of the desert, of survival, of knowing when to fight and when to wait. Your woman, the Apache said one evening as they watched the sun paint the rocks gold. She burns bright. She's not my woman. That might have been Smile again. The heart does not always ask permission. Micah thought of Clara at that damned party, talking about after, of her fingers on his face, her voice breaking when she made him promise to run. Was she alive? Or had Langton's rage consumed her too? She believes in redemption, Micah said quietly, thinks the town can be saved. And you? I just wanted justice for my brother. Wanted. Past tense. The Apache poked at the fire with a stick. What do you want now? Micah didn't answer because he didn't know. The clean simplicity of revenge had gotten muddy, complicated by storm cloud eyes and unexpected hope, by a woman who gave mercy with one hand while her father dealt death with the other. On the 7th day, the Apache declared him fit to travel. Slowly, he warned. The body remembers insult. They rode double on the paint pony, winding through canyons Micah had never known existed. The Apache knew every hidden spring, every secret path. They traveled by night, resting in shade during the scorching days. Micah's wounds pulled and ached, but held. There is a place, the Apache said as they neared Dust Vale's outskirts. Sacred to my people once. Now the Catholics have it. The old mission. I know it. She goes there. Your woman who is not your woman. Every day at sunset, she prays. Micah's heart kicked hard against his ribs. You've seen her. I see many things. The Apache reined in the pony. This is far as I go. That place holds too many ghosts. He slid down, helped Micah dismount. The movement sent lightning through his side, but he stayed upright. The mission's bell tower was visible in the distance, a black outline against stars. Why? Micah asked. Why help me? The Apache considered. Langton is a sickness. You might be medicine, might be poison. Either way, change comes. He turned the pony, paused. She mourns you. I have heard her weeping. Then he was gone, melting into the darkness like he'd never been. Micah stood alone in the desert night, torn between hope and dread. Clara alive but mourning. The town still under Langton's heel. The judge probably bought or buried. He made his slow way toward the mission, moving like the wounded animal he was. The streets of Dust Vale's edges were quiet, but he could see lights blazing from the fortune. Business as usual, built on blood and broken dreams. The mission sat apart, its adobe walls glowing pale in moonlight. The wooden doors stood open. No one would rob a church in Langton's town without permission, and Langton still played at piety when it suited him. Micah slipped inside, letting his eyes adjust to the candlelit dimness. She knelt at the altar rail, head bowed, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Still wearing black, he noted mourning clothes that made her look like a beautiful ghost herself. Her voice came soft, broken. Please, I don't ask for myself. But let him have found peace. Let him be with Samuel now, away from all this pain. Clara. The word came out rough, barely more than a whisper. She went rigid, then turned slowly, as if afraid to hope. When she saw him, her face transformed, shock to joy to anguish, all in a heartbeat. Micah, like she didn't trust her eyes. They said, we found blood. So much blood. I'm here. She flew to him then, and he caught her despite the screaming protest from his wounds. She was solid and warm and real, sobbing against his chest, fists bunching in his shirt like she could hold him to earth by will alone. God, I thought, shh, I'm here, I'm alive. She pulled back, hands mapping his face like a blind woman learning precious features. Then she hit him, hard enough to hurt. Fury replacing relief. 7 days! 7 days I thought you were dead. Do you know what that did to me? Do you? Her voice broke again. Don't ever do that again. I'll try not to get shot next time. This isn't funny. But she was kissing him then, desperate and salt-tinged with tears, and Micah stopped trying to think at all, just held her and kissed her back, there in that sacred space where prayers apparently sometimes got answered. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, reality crashed back. Clara saw him wince, noticed how carefully he held himself. You're hurt. How badly? I'll live. Apache medicine man found me. Neil, I should have known. At his look, she explained. He trades herbs with Dr. Pritchard sometimes. Lost family to my father. Her fingers ghosted over his side, finding bandages. We need to get you hidden. Father's men. The judge. Her face fell. Arrived 2 days ago. Father had documents ready, witnesses coached. The whole town put on a show of prosperity and order. Her voice turned bitter again. The judge declared Langton a pillar of the community, thanked him for maintaining civilization in the wilderness. Another bought official. Micah felt the last of his hope crumble, all those deaths for nothing. Samuel unavenged, justice denied again. There's more, Clara said quietly. Father's announced my engagement to Judge Harper. Says it's time I settled down. Took my place in society. She laughed. Broken glass sharp. The wedding's in 3 days. No? I don't have a choice. He keeps me under guard, only lets me come here because he thinks I'm praying for guidance to be a good wife. Her fingers found his again, laced tight. I was praying. But not for that. Run with me. Tonight. We'll take horses. Head for Mexico. And leave everyone here to suffer? Mrs. Chen. Who hid you that first week? The Hernandez women, who just lost their men trying to fight back. Clara shook her head. I can't. This is my father's sin. But it's my responsibility too. It's suicide to stay. Maybe. She touched his face again, gentle over the healing bruises. But maybe not. Father thinks he's won. But the town's different now. People have tasted resistance. They whisper your name like a prayer. Did you know that? The man who stood up to Langton and lived, barely lived, still counts. She glanced toward the door. I have to go soon. They'll check on me. But Micah, don't give up. Not yet. Father's planning something for the wedding. All his important friends will be there. He wants to show them his power, prove the town's completely his. And powerful men get careless when they think they've won. Something flickered in her eyes, sharp and dangerous. I've been a good daughter for a long time, quiet, obedient. He's forgotten I have my mother's blood too, and she was nobody's fool. Clara, what are you planning? Nothing yet, but 3 days is a long time, long enough for dead men to prove they're alive. For evidence to reach the right hands, for a town to remember it doesn't have to kneel. She kissed him again, quick and fierce. Stay hidden. Heal. When the time comes, I'll send word. And if there's no time, if he forces the wedding, then I'll be a widow before I'm truly a wife. The words came flat, matter of fact. One way or another, this ends. She left him there among the saints and shadows, disappearing into the night with the same grace she'd shown dancing in his arms. Micah sank into a pew, exhausted and aching. The Apache was right. His body remembered every insult, catalogued each hurt with vicious clarity, but he was alive. Clara was alive. And in 3 days, Dustvale would see a wedding, or a war. Outside, a coyote howled, long and mournful. Others answered, a chorus of wild voices refusing to be tamed. Micah listened and found himself almost smiling. The desert had its own justice, slow but certain. It buried the proud and nurtured the patient. He'd been proud, riding in with his simple hunger for revenge. Now he was learning patience, taught by an Apache's herbs and a woman's complicated courage. 3 days to heal, 3 days to plan, 3 days until Edward Langton learned that some men were harder to kill than others, and that some daughters were more dangerous than they seemed. Clara fled her own wedding like a thief in the night. White silk turned gray with desert dust. Her mother's pearl combs abandoned somewhere between the church and freedom. She'd left Judge Harper standing at the altar, her father's rage erupting behind her like a volcano, the whole careful facade of civilization crumbling in minutes. The horse beneath her, stolen from the church's stable, ran hard toward the tree line, toward the cabin where she'd told Micah to wait. Behind her, shouts and gunfire split the air. Langton's men would follow, but she had a head start, and desperation lending wings to her flight. The wedding had been perfect until she stood 300 guests, the territorial governor himself presiding, her father strutting like a peacock in his finest suit. Then she'd turned from the altar, lifted her skirts, and run. Not a word of explanation, just pure action. Let them make of it what they would. The cabin appeared through the cottonwoods, dark and seemingly empty. Clara slid from the saddle, legs shaking from the wild ride, and pushed through the door. "Micah?" He emerged from shadow, and her heart clenched at the sight of him. Still too thin, moving carefully around healing wounds, but on his feet and armed. His eyes swept over her, taking in the wedding dress, the wild hair, the desperate hope in her face. "You came," he said simply. "Did you doubt?" "Every minute." He caught her as she swayed, guided her to the room's single chair. What happened? The plan changed. Clara pulled pins from her hair, letting it fall around her shoulders. Father moved the ceremony up, said he'd had a vision from God about making it dawn instead of noon. I think he suspected something. Through the window came the sound of horses, still distant but closing. Micah checked his weapons with the efficiency of a man who'd done it too many times. How many will he send? All of them. I didn't just run. Micah, I stood before the town's most powerful men and denounced him, told them about Samuel, about the murders, the corruption, everything. She laughed, high and wild. You should have seen their faces, the governor especially. He'd taken so much of Father's money, he looked ready to faint. Clara, my God, he'll kill me, yes, probably, but not before the whole territory knows the truth. She stood, went to him. The federal judge, the real one, was in the congregation. I'd sent him the journals through a courier 2 days ago. He had questions. He said, now he has answers. Micah stared at her like she'd grown wings. You planned this, the whole thing, not the running. I'd hoped to maintain the charade longer, gather more evidence, but when Father moved the ceremony, she shrugged. Sometimes you have to improvise. The hoofbeats were louder now, accompanied by shouting. Micah moved to the window, counting riders in the moonlight. 8, maybe 10. We can't hold this cabin. We don't have to, just long enough. For what? Clara smiled then, and it was sharp as a blade. For the rest of the town to remember they outnumber Father's men 20-1. Mrs. Chen is ringing the mission bell, the signal we agreed on. Every family he's hurt, every person he's ground down, they're gathering now. An uprising, a reckoning. She pulled a derringer from her bodice, his wild Clara, armed even in wedding white, though we might not live to see it finished. About that. Micah drew her close, and she could feel his heart beating strong despite everything. I've been thinking about after... Now? We're about to be under siege and you want to discuss the future. Seems like the right time, in case we don't get another... He cupped her face in calloused hands. I want that after. Clara, with you, building something clean in all this mess, if you'll have me. She kissed him for answer, pouring all her fear and hope and love, yes, love, no point denying it now, into the contact. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she saw her own feelings reflected in his eyes. Yes, she said simply. If we survive this, yes to everything. The first shot shattered the window, showering them with glass. They dove for cover as bullets peppered the cabin walls. Langton's men had arrived, spreading out to surround the small building. "Halt!" Jake Briggs's voice carried through the night. "Send out the girl and maybe we let you die quick," Micah answered with his rifle, the shot taking one rider from his saddle. Return fire intensified, wood splintering around them. Clara crouched behind an overturned table, the derringer steady in her hand. "Save your shots," Micah advised. "Make them count." The siege began in earnest. Langton's men had cover behind rocks and trees, content to pin them down, while others presumably circled for better position. Micah moved between windows, firing carefully, making every bullet matter. Clara watched the back door, knowing it was only a matter of time. Then, new sounds. Gunfire from the tree line, but not aimed at the cabin. Shouts of alarm from Langton's men. More horses, many more, and voices raised in Spanish and English and Chinese. "The town," Clara breathed. They came. What followed was chaos. The besiegers became the besieged as dust veils oppressed poured from the darkness. Not trained fighters, most of them, but angry and desperate and done with fear. Langton's men, caught between the cabin and this new threat, fell back in disorder. Micah kicked open the door. "Now!" They ran through the battle, Clara's wedding dress making her a target and a banner both. She saw misses, Chen wielding an ancient shotgun, the Hernandez women armed with machetes, even Dr. Pritchard firing from horseback. The town had risen at last. But where was Langton? She found him at the Fortune. Of course. The casino's doors stood open. Its defenders fled or fallen. Inside. Edward Langton sat at his private table, a glass of brandy before him, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. "Clara." He didn't seem surprised when she entered. Micah at her shoulder. Still wearing white, though somewhat worse for wear. "It's over. Father." "Is it?" He sipped brandy with steady hands. "A mob is not justice. Order will be restored, as it always is. Money will change hands. The right people will remember who pays them, and Dustvale will return to normal." "No." Clara moved closer, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Not a monster, just a small man who'd mistaken cruelty for strength. "The federal judge has the evidence. The whole territory knows what you've done. There's no buying your way out this time." Something flickered in Langton's eyes. Fear, maybe, or just recognition of defeat. His hand moved toward the desk drawer, but Micah was faster, pinning it to the wood. "I wouldn't," Micah said quietly. Langton looked between them, his daughter and the man who should have been dead. Outside, the sounds of fighting were dying down, replaced by voices raised in victory. "You would have been queen of this territory," he told Clara. "Everything I built, it was for you. Built on graves," she replied. "I don't want it." "Then what do you want?" Clara thought of the town beyond these walls, broken but not beaten, of the work needed to heal wounds decades in the making, of the man beside her who'd taught her that justice and revenge weren't always the same thing. "Redemption," she said finally. "For all of us." Langton laughed, bitter and disbelieving. "There's no redemption for men like me." "Maybe not, but you can start by telling the truth. All of it. Let the dead rest honest at last." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Langton reached for paper and pen with his free hand. "Very well. If confession is what you want, daughter mine, then confession you shall have." He wrote for an hour while the town gathered outside. Confessed to Samuel's murder, to dozens of others, to bribes paid and officials corrupted. His pen scratched across paper like a man carving his own headstone. When he finished, he signed with a flourish and pushed the pages to Clara. "There, your precious truth. May it bring you more happiness than lies brought me." The federal judge arrived with the sunrise, accompanied by marshals who'd ridden hard through the night. They took Langton into custody, along with what remained of his men. The trial would come later, but the verdict was no longer in doubt. Clara stood on the Fortune steps, watching her father led away in chains. She'd thought she'd feel triumphant, but there was only sadness for the waste of it all. Regrets? Micah asked softly. Many, but not about this. She turned to him, seeing past the dust and blood to the man who'd helped her find courage. What now? Now we bury the dead proper. See Brennan and the others healed. Start cleaning up this mess. And then we build that after we talked about. He pulled her close, there in the morning light with the whole town watching. If you're still willing, I'm willing. Around them, Dustvale began the slow work of resurrection. The fortune would close, its blood money redistributed to those it had been stolen from. The mission bell rang out, calling people to gather, to plan, to hope. It would take time, years, maybe, to wash the poison from the town's veins. There would be setbacks, arguments, the inevitable friction of people learning to live without fear. But it was a start. Clara buried her wedding dress that afternoon, laying it in the ground like a symbol of the life she might have lived. Micah stood beside her, solid and sure, his hand warm in hers. No regrets? He echoed his earlier question. No, that Clara died when I ran from that altar. This one has different plans. Such as? She smiled, and for the first time in memory, it held no shadows. Ask me again in a year, after we've had time to know who we are without all this pain. Fair enough. They walked back through Dustvale's dusty streets, past people already working to rebuild. The Hernandez women had claimed the Fortune's kitchen, turning it into a communal gathering place. Dr. Pritchard was organizing a proper clinic. Even the Chinese, long relegated to the edges, were moving more freely through town. It wasn't perfect. It might never be. But it was better, and getting more so each day. That night, Clara and Micah sat outside the boarding house, watching stars appear in the desert sky. The same stars that had witnessed so much death now looked down on tentative peace. I love you, Clara said suddenly. I should have said it before, when we thought we might die, but I was too scared of making it real. And now? Now I'm more scared of wasting time. She looked at him, this man who'd ridden into town seeking vengeance and found something harder and more precious. I love you, Micah Holt. Whatever comes next, I want to face it with you. He kissed her then, sweet and slow, with all the time in the world stretching before them. When they finally parted, he was smiling in a way that transformed his weathered features. I love you too, Clara, not Langton. Any more, have since you knocked me flat in that dusty street. I did not knock you flat. Metaphorically speaking. They argued about it gently, teasingly, the way people do when they have a future to fill with such small disputes. Around them, Dustvale settled into sleep, its nightmares finally giving way to dreams. Come morning, there would be work. Always work in a place trying to heal. But tonight, two souls who'd found each other in darkness sat close and watched stars and planned thereafter. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 6 months after Edward Langton's arrest, Dustvale had transformed beyond recognition. The Fortune stood empty now, its gaudy facade fading under the desert sun. But the rest of the town bloomed with new life. Where once fear had walked the streets, children now played. Where blood had soaked into dust, gardens grew. Clara stood before the newly built schoolhouse, watching as Mrs. Chen taught letters to a mixed class of Mexican, Chinese, and American children, something unthinkable in Langton's time. The building had risen from donations, every family contributing what they could, built by hands that had once held weapons in desperation. 23 students today, Dr. Pritchard said, joining her on the porch. Up from 18 last week. Good. Education breaks chains faster than bullets. Clara smiled at the old doctor who'd become one of her closest advisors. How's Brennan? Cantankerous as ever. Claims the new medicine tastes like horse liniment, but he'll live to complain another day. Thomas Brennan had survived his wounds and found a new purpose testifying at trials throughout the territory, helping convict corrupt officials who'd taken Langton's money. His testimony, combined with Clara's journals, had sent ripples all the way to Washington. Miss Clara. Young Miguel Hernandez ran up, gap-toothed and grinning. Mr. Micah says to tell you the stage is coming. Clara's heart lifted. Micah had been gone 3 weeks, escorting a prisoner to Tucson and meeting with territorial officials about Dustvale's new charter. She smoothed her simple calico dress, so different from the silks of her old life, and headed for the main street. The stage rolled in amid dust and fanfare, passengers climbing down stiff-legged and grateful. But Clara's only had eyes for the man who swung down from beside the driver, moving easier now that his wounds had fully healed. Micah caught her up in an embrace that would have scandalized her former self, right there in the middle of town for everyone to see. She didn't care. Let them see that Edward Langton's daughter had found something her father never understood: love without conditions, freely given and received. "Miss me?" he asked against her hair. "Every minute. How was Tucson?" "Hot, crowded, full of politicians making promises." He pulled back to look at her, thumb brushing her cheek. "But successful. The new town charter's approved. Dustvale will have proper elections next month. And a proper sheriff? If he gets elected." Micah had reluctantly agreed to stand for the position, pushed by citizens who remembered his courage. "Though I'm thinking my opponent might have the advantage. Mrs. Chen would make an excellent sheriff." Clara agreed with a grin. "But I think you'll manage." They walked through town together, Micah's arm around her waist, greeting people who'd become friends through shared struggle. The Hernandez family had opened a restaurant where the old saloon had been. The Chinese herbalist now operated openly, his medicines no longer hidden. Even some of Langton's former men had stayed, finding honest work and slowly earning forgiveness. "There's news from the trial," Micah said as they reached the boarding house that had become their temporary home. "Your father was found guilty on all counts. Life imprisonment." Clara felt the familiar twist of emotions: relief, sadness, the complicated grief of losing a parent who'd never truly been one. Good, maybe now the ghosts can rest. All of them? She knew he meant Samuel. They'd placed a proper headstone on his grave, held a service that half the town attended, but some wounds went deeper than ceremony could heal. He'd be proud, Clara said softly. Seeing what his death eventually brought, not the revenge you wanted, but something better. Justice, real justice. Micah nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think he would." They sat on the porch as evening painted the desert in shades of gold and purple. This had become their ritual, watching the sunset, planning the next day's work, stealing moments of peace in lives that had known too little of it. "I've been thinking," Clara said, "about the fortune. What about it? The building's sound, just needs cleaning out. We could turn it into something useful. A meeting hall, maybe, or a proper hospital. God knows Pritchard needs more space." "From casino to hospital. Your father would hate that." "Yes," Clara said simply. "He would." Micah laughed, pulling her closer. They'd had this conversation before: what to do with the physical reminders of Langton's reign. Some wanted everything torn down, wiped clean. But Clara believed in transformation, in taking symbols of oppression and making them serve freedom instead. "Speaking of building things," Micah said, suddenly serious, "I bought the Alcott place, that ranch north of town, with a good well." Clara turned to stare at him. "You bought a ranch? Man needs roots. Figured it was time I planted some." He reached into his pocket, pulled out something that caught the dying light. "Figured maybe you'd want to plant them with me." The ring was simple, a gold band with a single small stone. Nothing like the ostentatious jewelry her father had favored. It was perfect. "Micah Holt, are you proposing?" "Attempting to, though I'm making a mess of it." He slipped from the chair to one knee, there on the porch where anyone could see. "Clara, you saved me. Not from bullets, though you did that too. From becoming the kind of man who could only destroy. You showed me how to build instead. Will you marry me? Will you help me make that after we kept talking about?" "Yes." No hesitation. no doubt. Yes to all of it. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him up for a kiss that drew cheers from passing townsfolk. Let them look. Let them see that love could grow even in soil watered with blood and tears. When? She asked when they finally parted. Soon as you want. Tomorrow, if the preacher's willing. Next month, Clara decided. After the elections, we'll do it proper, with the whole town invited. Show them that Dustvale knows how to celebrate life, not just mourn death. Whatever you want, long as it ends with you being my wife. The stars came out as they planned. Simple dreams that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. A working ranch, children someday. A town where justice meant more than the whim of whoever held the most guns. It wasn't the life Clara had been raised for, but it was the one she'd chosen. Later, as the town settled into sleep, they walked to the cemetery. Samuel's grave stood among the others now, no longer alone, but part of a community of remembered souls. Clara placed wildflowers while Micah stood silent, hand resting on the headstone. "We did it, Sam," he said finally. "Not how I planned, but it's done. Langton's paying for his crimes. In this town, it's becoming something you would have liked, something worth the price." The wind whispered through the mesquite trees, and for a moment, Clara could almost hear an answer. Approval, maybe, or just the desert's eternal voice, reminding them that everything passed, good and evil both. But the land endured. "Ready to go home?" Micah asked. Home. Such a simple word for such a complicated journey. But looking at him, at the town sleeping peaceful under stars, at the ring on her finger catching moonlight, Clara knew they'd found it at last. "Yes," she said, taking his hand. "Let's go home." They walked back through Dustvale's quiet streets, past the schoolhouse and the clinic, the restaurant and the transformed lives. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, elections to oversee, a ranch to build, a wedding to plan. There would be setbacks, struggles, the inevitable conflicts of people learning to govern themselves. But tonight, Clara walked beside the man she loved through a town that had chosen hope over fear, and that was miracle enough. They'd started with revenge and found redemption, started with death and found life, started as strangers bound by tragedy and became partners bound by choice. The lights in the boarding house windows welcomed them home. Inside, Mrs. Holloway had left coffee warming and cornbread on the table. Small kindnesses that meant everything. They sat together in the kitchen, planning their future by lamplight. Voices low and intimate. "No regrets?" Micah asked one last time, catching her hand across the table. "None," Clara said, meaning it. "This is exactly where I want to be." Outside, a coyote called to its pack, wild and free. The sound no longer seemed mournful to Clara's ears. It was just another voice in the desert chorus, singing of survival and stubborn life. Like Dustvale itself, scarred but standing, proof that sometimes the hardest ground grew the strongest roots. She squeezed Micah's hand and let herself imagine their children playing in these streets, running free without fear. It was a good dream, worth every battle they'd fought to make it possible. And in the morning, they'd continue building it, one choice at a time, one day at a time, together. The lamp burned low as they talked and planned and dreamed. Two souls who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to walk into the light, outside. Dustvale slept peacefully, its transformation nearly complete. From a town of shadows and secrets to a place where truth could bloom. It was enough. It was everything. It was home. Clara leaned against Micah's shoulder, feeling his steady heartbeat, and whispered the words she'd never thought to say. "I'm happy." Simple words, but in them lived a whole world of meaning. After all the pain and loss, after the long journey through darkness, happiness had found them at last. Not the fleeting pleasure her father had sold in his casino, but something deeper and more lasting. The quiet joy of lives well lived and love well given. And that, more than any revenge, was the true justice Samuel Holt deserved. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Micah and Clara as they found justice, redemption, and ultimately love in the dusty town of Dustvale. Where are you listening to this story from? Please leave a comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about this tale of romance and redemption in the American frontier. Your feedback means the world to us.